Good morning once again. Hello? Someone? Okay. You had a coffee? Was good? Perfect. So I hope you are having a great time these 2 days. This is the fourth edition of Invest in Ethiopia high-level business forum, which is organized by Ethiopian Investment Commission, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia's Ministry of Finance, and our country's development, the partner groups, and which bring us a lot of policymakers, investors, local investors, and foreign investors in one place. We're discussing about the future of Ethiopia's investment as well. Are we ready for business as well? It's the right time to invest in Ethiopia. Sectors such as cement, steel, and transport. Her work spans Europe, India, and Africa, with a growing focus on enabling investment and innovation ecosystem for sustainable industrial development. But before we do that, we have a presentation under the title. Do we have a Dr. Benti here with us? Dr. Benti from, all right, okay. Oh, okay, sure. I'll be looking for you. That's why I asked for Dr. Benti. He's going to give us a presentation under the title. So allow me to invite Dr. Benti Ferdisa from Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Ministry of Planning and Development, to give us a detailed presentation on the title. Please allow me to invite him to the stage. Welcome him to the stage with a warm applause, please.
Thank you, Milkisa. በጣም አመሰግናለሁ. No, but we are going to have a keynote speaker who will introduce. Okay. But really, thank you for bringing that energy to this session. My name is Hampus Holmer. I'm a political and trade officer at the Embassy of
Climate Plan, the NDC 3.0. Let me warmly acknowledge our distinguished panelists. We are honored by the presence of Her Excellency Professor Rachel Kite, the UK Special Representative on Climate, and my colleague Amanda McLaughlin that will replace Her Excellency later in the panel, I believe, whose leadership in global climate diplomacy brings an important international perspective to the discussion that we are having here today. We are also very pleased to have with us Dr. Mukhtar Duke Ahmed from the NDC Partnership, Dr. Waile Aboyade of Sun King, Mr. Tomer Shalit of Climate View, and Mr. Lamin Trawali of the Global Green Growth Initiative to the panel. Together, this panel reflects exactly the kind of coalition we need. Public leadership, private capital, innovation, and international partnership. I would also like to extend a special welcome to the newly arrived United Nations Resident Coordinator to Ethiopia, Dr. Ozonia Ojelo, who are with us here in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ozonia. We are happy to see you here. As a sponsor of the Invest in Ethiopia 2026, Sweden has chosen to invest in this forum because we believe that Ethiopia has an important role to play in Africa's green transition. We see this as a place to connect climate ambition with capital, partnerships, and commercial opportunity. Today, as Ethiopia faces the consequences, and not only Ethiopia, of course, of interrupted fossil fuel supply, the need to accelerate the green transition is clearer than ever. But that transition will only happen if climate action becomes investable. Ethiopia's green agenda is ambitious. The challenge now is to translate that ambition into projects, pipelines, partnerships, and policy conditions that can attract private capital. Public finance alone will not be enough. Private sector engagement is essential, from renewable energy to climate-smart agriculture, from green industry to sustainable urban development and resilient infrastructure. That is why this conversation matters. We need to ask, what makes an NDC credible to investors? What turns policy signals into bankable opportunities? And how do we reduce risk, strengthen planning, and channel capital to the sectors where it's needed most? Sweden is pleased to support practical efforts in this space. Lead IT, co-led by Sweden and India, and with Ethiopia as an active member, has helped advance global momentum on industrial transition. Climate View shows how data and digital planning tools can help identify and track investment opportunities. And the Climate Matchmaker initiative seeks to accelerate the green transition by matching clients with innovative private sector solutions. We hope that today's sessions will be concrete, candid, and forward-looking. Above all, I hope it will help show how Ethiopia can strengthen its position as a green investment destination, and how the road to COP32 can become a platform not only for climate ambition, but for real economic transformation. If we get this right, climate action will not be seen as a cost, but as a driver of competitiveness, resilience, innovations, and jobs. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to the discussion, and with that, I'm very pleased now to hand over to Dr. Benti Ferdisa from the Ministry of Planning and Development. I thank you.
Thanks so much, His Excellency. So following this, we're going to proceed to the presentation. Dr. Benti will take place.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Ethiopian Investment Commission and Minister of Finance. And good morning and welcome to this very important session. And this is really very important, especially for Minister of Planning and Development, to really advocate the climate action policies that we are really going. So I do have a brief presentation on the national determined contribution of the third version that we are yet submit for the UNFCCC, and also areas that really, where do we intervene the private sectors and the opportunities that we have. Those things is, and this is just my outline. I will just go through and briefly. Just when you start NDC, just as we all know, NDC is just one of the instruments that really we just, or as a party, submit in 5 days and 5 years update. And so based on this, as far as we are just ratified the Paris Agreement, we submit the third version of this NDC. And in our NDC, when we enhance, we just base, we take the stock take of the second NDC, that we are really, our policies, interventions, in terms of all the abatement potentials that we are set for the mitigation and adaptation actions, especially how can we really end the financial issues, the enablers. So through this, we take the stock take of all the abatement potentials, and we just try to also look at really where do we intervene for the next, and also what's really the outcomes that we get through these 5 years. And when we see the end tracking mitigation achievements, we try to just look at really the target against the sectors and also the abatement potential in terms of the sectors. And we achieve that the mitigation or the emission level is just from the business as usual against, it's about 273.5, which is below the unconditional one, and which is really for looking at the interventions. And this is just the interventions, and also we try to also look at the milestones, trying to plan for each intervention, especially the green legacy initiatives that we is really implement, and also the achievements that we for the emission reductions that we get in terms of the forest sectors, and also as well the other initiatives like the sectors for energies, the hydros, the solars, the winds that we are as national trying to implement so far. So this just not only this one, especially Ethiopia is just reforming the policies, especially on the transport sectors, that is fully stopping importing of the fuel-based cars, and also fully change it to the electric cars. And so there are also a lot of abatement potentials that we are looking for. So based on this, we try to just enhance our NDC, and we also see the adaptation actions that we are planned, because in our second NDC, we are just identify about 14 abatement potential or adaptation actions that will be just intervene for each sectors. And we also try to see this progress achievement is for the implementation for the NDC2, and also the smaller scale irrigation actions, the climate, smart agriculture actions, and renewable energies, and also the successful implementation that we are really achieve for the emissions reductions as well as the resilience communities. When we see the implementation challenge, this is very important for our third generation enhancement. The first one is just facing of the climate finance scarcity. This is very important, because when we set our NDC, we try to just separate conditional and unconditional actions. Those unconditional could be just implemented if you get the climate finance, and those unconditional is just the government implementation. But because we try to set our cost is the implementation about 316 billion USD is needed, but from this, the mobilized climate finance is very limited, and so climate finance is one of the challenge in our NDC to achieve our goals. And the other one is the technical and institutional capacity limitations that we are just identified throughout when we take the stock take. And the other one is the private sectors and also non-governmental actors' participation in the implementation of this NDC2 is also very limited. The other one is the quality of the data, the transparency issues, the data management issues is also very limited throughout the implementation of this NDC2. The other one is the coordination issue is also very limited. And just based on this one, we try to just enhance our third NDC. And for the active, our NDC is just, we try to increase our ambition and the emission reduction ambitions, which is about 17.3 greenhouse gas emission reduction is will be just targeted for the coming 10 years, or which is for 2030. And this is just basically also separated into conditional and unconditional. And also we target about 273.6 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent will be just targeted for the coming 2035. And for this, and this is also just aligned with the long-time low-emission developmental strategy, which is already submitted for the UNFCCC plan or strategy. And the other one is also the flagship that is really Ethiopia is the leadership that we committed to reduce this greenhouse gas or the climate actions. And when we come to the adaptation ambitions, we try to also set the actions as per the target, as per the sectors, and also we put the target for each actions, and we try to also increase also the mechanization and also the restoration of the forest, and the irrigation will be just improved through the water management issues. And we also just try to put the target for the livestock actions, because this is also one of the key contributor for the national aggregate of greenhouse gas emissions. And when we come to just following this adaptation, and we also just try to put actions on the urban resilient issues, and in terms of the water resilient management. So, and just when we see the enablers for the NDC implementation, we also just try to cost the mitigation and the adaptation implementation costs, and really to implement those, which is just about 58.5 billion USD will be just for mitigation actions, and also about 14 billion also for adaptation. And this is just really what we are looking for, the climate finance support. And this is just how can we govern this, the abatement potential of the actions. Because Ministry of Planning and Development is the leader for the climate and environmental actions, and it's coordinated as a national. This is the MR review, how can we really monitor and measure and report our climate actions. And this is just very critical and very important issues. Where do we really find the engagement of the private sectors? So one is just investment on climate finance, because it is just one of the scarcity when we are just taking the stock take. The other one is really looking with the green production or decarbonization system, especially for the manufacturing issues and for the transport and other sectors. And the other one is the climate smart agriculture value chain practice, which is really also one of the areas that we are indicating in our third generation NDC. And the other one is innovation and technology transfer. This is very important, because we are just looking to digitalize our climate action data and interventions. And the other one is really job creation and skill exchange. And the sixth one is really the new areas that we are looking, and also develop the strategies and proclamations for the carbon market, and the nature-based solution is one of the critical areas that we are really engaged the private sectors. And the other one is just the data issues, the transparency issues, to digitalize our climate actions. I think this is my last slide. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much once again, Dr. Bentu. Please give him a warm round of applause. Thanks so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as part of this event, this high-level panel discussion is focusing on the private sector opportunities in climate action linked to Ethiopia's ambitious climate agenda. So I think it's better if we proceed to the panel discussion, since I already introduced Mrs. Arati, one of our co-moderators. Please give her a warm round of applause and welcome her to the stage. Our moderator is going to be, we have two moderators, Dr. Hampus Holmer. Did I pronounce it well? Thank you. He's a public health physician, academic, and diploma, serving as Second Secretary for Political Affairs and Trade at the Embassy of Sweden. With his experience spanning policy, international cooperation, and sustainable development, he brings a cross-sector perspective to discussions in climate investment, NDC 3, and the road to COP32. Please give him a warm applause and welcome him to the stage. Following this, our moderator and co-moderator, they are going to invite their panelists. Yes, all right, okay. I wish you all the best to have a very wonderful panel discussion. The floor is yours. Thanks so much.
በጣም አመሰግናለሁ ሚልኪሳ እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ once again and I continue to be very excited about this session and we really want to kick off the panel discussion part of the session by inviting all of our panelists. I want to start with Her Excellency Professor Rachel Kite, the UK's Special Representative on Climate. Welcome up on stage. Please. Dr. Mukhtar Abduke, NDC Partnership Country Facilitator, based at the Ministry of Planning and Development. Welcome. Dr. Wale Abuyade, Global Vice President of Public Policy and Government Relations at Sun King, and also an alumnus of a Swedish university, my own alma mater, so welcome.
And I will take over from Hampus. I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas Shalit, Chief Product Officer from Climate View, to join us on stage. And last but not least, Mr. Lamine Traoré, Sustainable Finance Lead with the Global Green Growth Institute. So what we're going to do to start is, so the audience understands who's on the panel, we're very happy to have them here, is give everyone 5 minutes to introduce themselves, tell you who they are in context of the question that we are here to discuss. NDCs, and I think we heard some very important points to start us off. If we take Johan's comments, how do we make climate action investable? And how do we actually use the NDC as a credible tool and a credible lever for bankable projects going forward? We heard, of course, from Dr. Benti about the issues that MOPD, the Ministry of Planning and Development, are facing when it comes to the financing challenge, $16 billion, but also the questions of technology, access to finance, and of course, capacity and know-how. So we're going to ask our panelists to unpack these, discuss what's happening in Ethiopia, use their experiences to take things forward and where we can go towards, of course, COP32, but of course, beyond that as well. To start us off, I'm going to ask Professor Rachel Kite to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm really delighted that I could be here today. Thank you to Sweden for your leadership, and the biggest thanks of all to the Ethiopian government, because to produce the third generation of these nationally determined contributions, these plans, these bottom-up plans, is no mean feat, and to cost it out is also a complicated business. And so what we see in the best nationally determined contributions from around the world is that they are in line with the ambition that we have to have as an international community to curb emissions so that we give the next generation of Ethiopians, the next generation of Africans and everybody else a chance to live in peace on this planet. So the ambition is correct. And also it covers the whole of the economy. So all emissions from all kinds of global warming gases, and then every sector of the economy. So these are basically the constructs for investment, right? So this is the investment context for every country. And Ethiopia's NDC, you know, is a sort of best-in-class document. So as a pragmatic partner to Ethiopia, as the United Kingdom, we're looking at how do we direct our own support by sector behind the NDC. So the NDC becomes a framework for our cooperation, but also it becomes a very important lever for the crowding in of private investment. Now, of course, the Prime Minister here has been very clear about Ethiopia's aspirations for green growth, for the green legacy, for a revolutionary approach to forestry management, opening up carbon markets so that you've got an additional revenue stream into the country. Also the need to make sure that clean energy is available to all, but also that clean energy is a solution for the region. Obviously, this is some of the cheapest energy that can be evacuated into the East Africa power pool, but there's much more to be done. Clean energy, of course, as we found out again, poignantly, is the source of energy security. And then off the back of that, you can electrify, providing opportunities for green manufacturing, green industry. So all of that has to be attractive to international pools of capital. And so one of the very important roles for us in the run-up to COP32 is to find ways to continue to fill the information gap that would allow an international investor to understand that investing on the African continent, sub-Saharan Africa, investing in Ethiopia, is actually not as risky as perhaps is perceived. And there's a lot of work going on with the multilateral development banks and others to close the asymmetry of information. And then secondly, to make it more possible for international pools of capital to invest, often alongside multilateral investment vehicles, whether they be multilateral development banks, multilateral climate funds, plurilateral climate funds, etc., and so that we can use public money to induce private money. Now, this is not new. We've been doing this for 20 or more years, but the scale at which we have to do that is important. And so the climate negotiations increasingly are focused not on negotiating. We've negotiated everything really at this point. What we have to do now is drive the action agenda and drive the fulfillment of what we've negotiated, and then bring the financing behind it. And that's the role for a partner in the global north behind the vision of Ethiopia and an Africa COP in the end of 2027. So I'm here talking to the government about how they're planning to do that, and using our sort of expertise and our experience, but also very pleased that my visit coincides with this investment forum, because this is the way that we deliver not only growth and prosperity and peace, this is the way that we actually deliver on our climate objectives as well. It is one and the same.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and of course, climate action being investment action. And that is critical. The NDC becomes our product where everyone is speaking from the same page. And we need to use that product to actually take it forward and create the levers. The action agenda, of course, is the underlying pinning of the COP discussions. We need to move forward with that. But I would like to take the NDC discussions to our next speaker to understand how to unpack how we move from NDC to investment strategy, investment goals. And to do that, I'd like to invite Dr. Mukhtar, NDC Partnership Country Facilitator, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share how we have been, what we have been doing together with the ministry. Just I want to compliment what Dr. Banti has presented. We have learned a lot from the previous NDCs when we developed the third NDCs. We have realized that when you say we, within Ministry of Planning and Development and the sector organizations involved in the NDC sector. It is not only about resilient building. It is about, as Dr. Remti has rightly mentioned, it's about jobs. It's about growth. It's about development. It's about healthier cities. And with this scope, probably the public finance, as the first speaker have said, public finance is not enough. So we should have to think of going into looking for new areas or underdeveloped investment sources. For that, like what we have done, we have already identified the potential areas, which, again, Dr. Banti has mentioned. Within the climate smart agriculture, we have tried to look into the cold chain services, how you get those products, perishable products produced by smallholder farmers to the consumers. You need to develop that logistic and the sustainable cooling services. We have looked into the irrigation. Again, on the irrigation side, we should have to, all irrigation schemes, even now, are used by farmers using, these diesel pumps should have to be changed to solar power. There is a huge potential for that. Of course, there are development partners who are trying to promote that. Again, on the urban and the green area development, yes, waste management is another thing. Green building, We don't, there are enormous potential for the private sector to involve in promoting those green technologies that can deliver on the needs of to make houses and the buildings livable and comfortable for working. Again, the same value chains on the forest sector, they are not well developed, and still we are importing timber from abroad. And we should have to look at that as an opportunity for private sector involvement. Knowing this, identifying these areas, what we have then moved into is, together with World Bank, we have embarked on developing the investment plan. Why we want to develop the investment plan, which we have not done in the previous NDCs, because the private sector wants to be convinced about what the areas that is going to invest. We should have to package these investment projects. We should have to come up with a pipeline projects, investable projects that we can, that the private sector can, that can attract the private sector. Again, on the enabling environment, Ethiopia is currently almost a draft carbon market strategy, and the proclamation is there, it's on the table. It was developed with the support of FCDO, World Bank, and GGI. That was not there before. So transparent, carbon market is quite transparent, and reporting together with MOPD, together with Ethiopian Artificial Intelligence Agency, is currently developing our integrated MRV and ME system. Hopefully when that's launched, then that's another instrument that can attract private sector to involve in the carbon markets. Again, on policy and the regulatory environment, before we are looking also into the governance structures, the coordination structures, and what is needed in terms of capacity building of sectors to make these projects or plan investment. We have developed some work together with the African Development Bank. That's also definitely will help to improve our readiness, public institutions' readiness for attracting private sector investment. In short, that's what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mukta, thank you so much. If I were to just summarize in terms of what you're talking about, the NDC becomes that whole of country approach. We cannot look at this as an in-silo investment plan. We have to look at this as a country-wide investment plan. But like you say, and critical to today's discussion, public finance is not enough. The government has a strong role to play, like you say, in carbon markets and where we go with that, putting a price on carbon, but we need the private sector to engage. And you mentioned solar and renewable energy, so you could not have made a better segue to our next speaker, Dr. Vale from Sun King, who is looking at Ethiopia, and we'd love to hear more about Sun King and, of course, the introduction to who you are.
Thank you, Arati. Excuse me. And good afternoon, everyone. I think we're just about into the afternoon. First of all, thank you to the organizers, to the Ethiopia Investment Commission for organizing such a fantastic event, to the Embassy of Sweden for leading this particular effort. It's been a really good time that we've had here since yesterday when we arrived. Honestly, I would say as a Nigerian, I'm really always proud every time. It's not my first time in Ethiopia, but every time I come in, I come in with a sense of pride. I grew up looking to Ethiopia, particularly as, the way we called it. I don't know if people still refer to it as the Lion of Africa. And this resonates as a Nigerian because we say Nigeria is the giant of Africa. So being in the Lion of Africa is always a thing of pride. And you could have a giant lion as well. But no, it comes with, I mean, for at least people who grew up in my time, Ethiopia evokes a number of really romantic and deep feelings as an Africa, as that first independent nation in Africa that's never been colonized, that has a proud history. So every time I'm here, I feel connected to that thought. I'm particularly proud to be here representing Sun King. Sun King is, I'd say, you know, as we've just heard, one of the best examples really of this public-private partnership to advance climate goals. We've worked with governments, we've worked with public institutions and public finance institutions, the World Bank, but we're a private company and we deliver on a climate-related goal. And that's really something to think about. And maybe one way to even put what Sun King does is we operate within the last mile of the electricity sector. So last mile, for many of you might not be familiar with the electricity lingo. You could divide the electricity sector into 3 or 4 parts. You have generation, where you actually generate the power. Then you have transmission, where you have to transmit the power to the areas where you need it. And then usually you have distribution / last mile. That's how the power then gets to the actual households and consumers, businesses that need it. And to a large extent, Africa, including Ethiopia, has really struggled with that last mile component. Even when we perform really well on the generation component, as we all know, you know, another thing of pride, again, for Ethiopia is the Grand Renaissance Dam. That's just an incredible achievement any way you look at it. I mean, it's a thing of pride to not just Ethiopians, but every African everywhere. But that's a very good example of generation. And as successful as that is, you could still have a gap where that does not necessarily or automatically translate to individual households actually having access to power. And we see that in Ethiopia where, you know, you still have close to 80 million people without access to power. And that's because of this last mile gap. Traditionally, this was done through distribution networks, but they are slow and they are expensive. The EU, I don't know if anyone from the EU is here, they've been doing a fantastic job with increasing connections to electricity through the grid, but by definition, it is slow and it is expensive because it's infrastructure that you have to build out. And so where we come in as Sun King is we're part of a group of a sector called decentralized renewable energy companies, where we're able to really combine all of these different aspects, generation, transmission, distribution, into basically a product approach. And this is one of the beauties of renewable energy and climate-friendly growth, that solar technology allows you to do this, allows you to be able to generate and distribute at the point of use. And we are number 1, really, in the world for doing this, what we call the off-grid solar sector. We've been around for about 15 years. We currently distribute, so basically our business model is we design these solar products. And this, when I say solar products, I mean the panels, the inverters, the batteries, all bundled into one kit, right? And we make this at very different levels to meet the needs and the energy demand needs of various households, all the way from households that just only require basic lighting to some of the more, I would say, middle class or upper class households like some of you here, right? So if you go to our booth, you will find all this range of products. And so we are able to produce, design, produce, finance, and distribute these systems into the most hardest to reach areas across Africa. And we're now at the level where we're doing this, I would say, somewhere between 350 to 400,000 systems every month across Africa. We're able to, again, produce, finance, and distribute. And we've done this without touching Ethiopia at all. So imagine the opportunities and the scale that we could go to if we come into Ethiopia. So we're a fantastic example of how you get private capital to be able to do a social benefit that is climate friendly. And we're really looking forward to be able to do the same here. One other point to also mention is that in addition to solar, we've been looking at some of the other energy services that where we could play a role using this distributed model, again, because distributed models are, really relatively faster to scale than your traditional grid infrastructure. And one in which we've locked in that will be of particular interest to Ethiopia and the NDCs is clean cooking. We know that according to the NDCs, clean cooking is one of the most prominent ways, mitigation approaches, right? Apparently, if I remember correctly, somewhere up to 85% of your mitigation targets are supposed to come, not from specifically, but from AFOLU, the forestry and land use. And we know that clean cooking has a direct impact on deforestation. And so by introducing clean cooking and our technologies through LPG gas, we're actually able to make a dent in this. So we hope that in Ethiopia we'll be able to not just bring in solar to communities who will never be able to never be able to afford it, and I'll talk a little bit about model how we make solar affordable to people and how we're able to get to these volumes. But we are also adding to that clean cooking through LPG stoves, and look forward to discussing how we do that later on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waller, for that inspiring intervention. Indeed, it seems like our panel is very well choreographed. Of course it is. And I think the segue from this discussion and intervention to the next one by Mr. Lamin Tarwali, Sustainable Finance Lead for Africa, is also quite clear, because at the very end you were touching on how do we close gaps, not just in delivery but also in financing. But indeed, before I let you in here, Lamin, I wanted to thank you, Professor Rachel Kite, for joining us. I know that you have another appointment and may have to run off. So perhaps if you would like to say any reflection on what you've heard so far before we send you off.
Yeah, my apologies to everybody. I have to cram a lot of things in today, so I'm sorry that I have to go, but I'm going to be replaced by our leader on development in the embassy here, Amanda, who's as excellent as I am, hopefully. Well, better than me, probably. I think that this public-private partnership is what we talk about all the time, but it really is now coming to the fore, and I think both the public sector and the private sector are getting better at making this work at scale, and I think that international partners are getting better at coming in behind very good NDCs. And then, with Sunking coming to Ethiopia, this is fantastic. They're a great firm. They've revolutionized things in Nigeria and other markets, I know from first-hand experience. The only thing I'd say to him is LPG, yes, but I'd like to see you demonstrating this with e-cooking as well. And if you'd call me, I'll set you up with the people who make them. So we can have solar stoves as well. So there's a huge challenge ahead of us. The world is working against us in some ways at the moment, but the opportunities are all there. And I'm very proud that Britain is a partner to Ethiopia, and I look forward to the next 18 months and really revving up investment. So thank you.
Could we take a quick picture of the panel before Her Excellency leaves? Amanda, if you could join us on stage. We have...
Are we taking a picture? Or are we, no? Okay. We'll use Photoshop later on. It's okay. So welcome to the stage, Amanda McLaughlin, the head of cooperation of the UK Embassy. We're really happy to have you for the last mile of this panel. So now we'll move from the giant lion to, if we're also moving, from the last mile to perhaps even the first mile, the financing. Lamin, we've heard about the need for financing at scale and beyond public budgets. From your experience and your work, how can we use instruments such as green, social, sustainability bonds to mobilize private capital for NDC implementation? What's your take on that one?
Thank you so very much for the organizers, actually, and it's a pleasure to share this panel with such distinguished, of course, professionals. And the question actually is very, very pertinent and timely. If we look around, we've seen that, okay, Ethiopia have really shown strong commitment to climate action, which we've seen from the climate resilient green strategy document, and as well as the presentation from the Ministry of Planning through their nationally determined contributions. So for Ethiopia, the vision is clear. And the ambition for climate action is equally very, very clear. However, as we move towards implementing NDC trees and the road to COP32, what is also very clear is the challenge that it presents. And that challenge is no longer about ambition, it's no longer about priorities, but this is about financing at scale and, of course, execution. So my role as Sustainable Finance Lead for Global Green Growth Institute, the focus has been, okay, what instruments do we have at our disposal to be able to scale up this financing for climate action? And the moderator asked some very relevant questions here pertaining to innovative instruments like green bonds, sustainable bonds, and the list goes on. Now, as a sustainable financing and capital market, from that perspective, three key challenges that I've seen. And of course, the first one being challenges around pipeline. I'm not going to delve into it more. For now, the focus is on the maybe credibility, which has to do mostly with frameworks. So if we want to approach this lens, let's say approaching these innovative instruments like green bonds, what do we do? Be it from sovereign perspective or from sub-sovereigns or corporates, private sector. So green bonds or sustainable bonds provide this opportunity as a means of financing to bridge this huge financing gap. And what do we need to do to go about actually issuing such green bond instruments? So first, it has to do with the most fundamental thing before you could issue any of these sustainable instruments is having robust frameworks. And that would require, of course, having green bond frameworks or sustainable bond frameworks to guide the issuance. And not just that, you would need to also make sure this framework identified eligible projects linked to the nationally determined contribution priority areas, for example, climate smart agriculture, like some of the colleagues have mentioned. How does it link to it? And also going further to align with international principles, for example, the ICMA Green Bond and Social Sustainability Bond Principles and Guidelines. Because what would that do is it boosts investor confidence, and that this is not just going to be then any sort of wishful list or show, but again, it follows some processes that investors will be very much comfortable to put in their fund. So in essence, the frameworks would allow for that credibility that investors are looking out for, because the ultimate goal is not now just public financing, but we wanted to bring in COP in the private financing to this. And with that, whatever frameworks we're doing, we need to always have investors at the back of our mind, because investors are very much keen to understand exactly these are the projects we are financing, and this goes beyond just pipeline, but you should have robust frameworks in place to be able to make sure this is possible. And besides that as well, it doesn't just stop from, okay, having a framework, a sustainable bond framework, you go to the market, raise these funds, what happens next? Making sure you have credible MRV systems, reporting, post-issuance reporting, and all those things. So at GGGI, we partnering with the EU Global Green Bond Initiative, wherein we're supporting first-time issuers in particular to issue such innovative instruments like green bonds. It could be any of you, sovereigns, sub-sovereigns, private sector. And cost of borrowing, we know, would be critical, because we always wanted to finance or raise funds at a very minimal cost. So through that partnership, through the GGBI window, of course, it has other facilities like could be green coupon facility that would make such issuances not just financing NDCs, but also lower the cost of the financing. So I think for the interest of time, I would stop here, and I'm happy to go further into other areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lamin, for bringing us into the world of finance, and also really for highlighting where the gaps lie in terms of not least data, to really understand where the investment opportunities lie, what the risks are, and how they can be mitigated. So that really brings us to our last panelist. for whom I think data and digital tools is your trade. And from the perspective of a company such as Climate View, how can your platform help governments and investors, bond creators, etc., to identify the potential for climate investments, and indeed the climate investment plans that Dr. Mukhtar mentioned earlier as well?
Well, so Climate View is a digital platform that contains modeling and simulation and a lot of data that helps translate high-level goals into concrete, investable transformation pathways. So have high-level goals, and you break it down to the number of vehicles that need to be electrified, the number of charging stations that will be required, the hectares of land that will be needed to be converted, etc. So very concrete shifts that must happen in society. And very importantly, they are all interconnected, because as we're all going to mention here, you can't look at one project at a time. And just as we were saying about green bonds, you want to look at a project, but you want to see how investing in one project gives effects across the entire system. So by helping governments break down the overarching goals into the concrete shifts, simulating what is required from the system, how they're interconnected, we get a shared systemic understanding of what's needed, and therefore can understand better which order we should be investing in, and maybe above all, you get a shared language across all the different departments, all the different stakeholders need to understand. So in some ways, having shared digital platform gives you a shared language, which might be the most important part.
Thank you very much, Tomer. And you were describing earlier a meeting where 4 or 5 different languages were spoken, but finding a common unified climate language was still possible across all of those.
Yes, I was in Asia last week and working in a workshop with cities from across Asia, simultaneously translated in Korean, Mandarin, and Japanese, which is an interesting experience in itself. But it's so clear that the challenges, and I could say about Climate View, one of the reasons that we can come with these actually quite detailed models is that we've been working, we didn't set out to start working with national NDCs, but we've been working with hundreds of cities across the world. And cities are interesting because they are very practical. You can't go in and talk about high-level goals. They want to know where that charging station is supposed to be built, where that cycle path needs to be placed. So you're forced to be very, very concrete. At the same time, they have to be systemic. But of course, we also all know that the NDCs at the high level have to be delivered across national, regional, and local levels. So the multi-level governance, which I think will be a core discussion at next COP as last one, is important. So using a shared language across cities, it shows itself very powerful, but then that actually also supports multi-level governance and then goes back to the working across silos that I was describing.
Thank you, Tomer. I thought, Arti, we are too far apart to whisper to each other, so now I'm just going to say what I would have whispered. But perhaps we'll let 1 or 2 members of the audience make an intervention before we have another round of questions for our panelists. And I thought perhaps we'd start with the newly arrived UN resident coordinator, of course, very knowledgeable in multi-level governance and the complexities of bringing many countries together. So, Excellency, if you would like... oh, okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the honor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Really fascinating panel and extremely important conversation. But all I'm going to highlight are things I've heard the panelists say, because this is just my 10th day at work. So don't think I'm the smart kid in the room who already suddenly has big ideas about what needs to happen. But something that I find important that they mentioned is about the opportunity for investment that all the panelists have highlighted. And Ethiopia has a high growth but an under-penetrated market. And so with a potential of $106 billion in investment, that's significant. And given where we are globally, I am not surprised there's a lot of interest about investing in Ethiopia, and I think all of us can play critical roles in help accelerating this. But like we heard yesterday, there are regulatory and policy issues that need to be addressed. So from a development partner perspective to make this happen, I think there's already huge opportunity for us to engage with the national actors in addressing these regulatory and policy issues, overall climate for investment, not just on the NDCs. And then, of course, the opportunity for pipelines. I think many panelists have highlighted that as well. And I think that does require a sense of collective action, because each of us, we're working as small silos. Everybody's talking about investable pipelines. And yet, if you look at the capacities and expertise we can all bring to the table for collective action, including with the financial institutions, that it's possible to develop structured bankable projects that have clear revenue models and documented metrics. And then I like the idea of frameworks, because it's not just about enough to talk about pipelines. What about the frameworks for financing that make private sector then become very interested in wanting to participate? What I see as a potential low-hanging fruit, it's what the rest of us as development partners can bring to the table. The UN system, all the bilaterals, multilaterals, we come together with decades of experience on the ground that is backed by data and evidence, and I think the last speaker mentioned all of that, which allows us to contribute in identifying where high-impact opportunities can be translated into investment-ready projects. What is missing is that we're not having this conversation yet. And I think beginning from here, from Amanda to Johan and the rest of the colleagues, that's an opportunity for us to start coming together and start aggregating what data sources do we have and how can we contribute to making this happen. And then a second opportunity that I see, we're all financing or supporting multiple small-scale climate-aligned projects. Now, can we work together to structure them into scalable investment opportunities with standardized methodologies that include clear, concise, quantifiable indicators? This can certainly help reduce transaction costs, improve bankability, but also create the specific entry points that are needed for investor confidence. So we can actually have dedicated conversations with potential investors using these as potential entry points. And then, of course, for us as UN, but everybody who said that as well, the opportunity that COP32 does represent for all of us. I think it's a remarkable moment, because you see a convergence of political momentum, global visibility, but also investor confidence that can converge to create a window where we can help to accelerate investor ambition, but also corporate innovation in priority investor sectors, but complemented by public financing. So I'm certainly looking forward to picking up on this conversation after today with all the colleagues from our development partner community, but potentially with my dear Nigerian brother, to have that conversation as well, but also with the national partners. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And I'm going to actually pick up on what you said in terms of bringing private sector into focus and to have the frameworks, the KPIs, if you like, on how we do this together, how we speak the same language, no in silos, collective action. Then that's something that we will echo throughout today's conversation. But it could be said that in the past, there has been a little bit of a gap between industry and the public sector. There's been a little bit of a gap of what the industry needs to actually create predictive policy, move forward in terms of transactions, and actually do what we heard yesterday the Deputy Prime Minister say, compete with confidence. So with this, I'm actually going to come to Dr. Vale and ask you, when you're looking at Ethiopia, when you're looking at investing in this emerging economy, when it comes to what you've heard, of course, His Excellency say, as well as the partners we've heard on the dais, what do you need to see on the ground to invest? What do you need to see before you can look at moving forward with confidence? And I want you to reflect also on what we heard yesterday and this morning about the importance of supply chains, the importance of culture when it comes to understanding how to engage on the ground, and of course the importance of resources to scale with confidence.
Yeah, thank you, Arti, and thank you, Your Excellency. So maybe before I go into that, just to give some context again, slight more context to Sun King, just to show how we have a lot of experience in this. I mean, in terms of Sun King's scale, we, like I said, operating in 12 markets. Ethiopia, hopefully, knock wood, be our 13th one. We have 4,000 staff spread across Africa, employ 40,000 agents, over 40,000 agents and counting to help us deliver our products. We start all the way from design, but you could actually split our business model into three main points. The engineering side, where we design these products, the distribution of it, and then the financing and final last mile delivery. And each of these have massive exposure to the government and to the regulatory environment or the policy environment in any particular area. But so far, to get to where we are now, and where we are is, again, a company that is moving over 350,000 units across Africa. We've now have over 25 million unique customers on the continent. And given this sort of like rate of growth, you can imagine just how fast that we go. We have an ambition to be able to reach 200 million people by 2030, sort of supporting Mission 300 goals and SDG 7. So this kind of presence and this kind of reach starts to urge you to inform what I'm going to say now about really our, where we see the role of the policy environment. And one of the key things really when it comes to policy environment is certainty. You can say anything you want about a particular policy, a particular rule. In fact, you know, there's a certain phrase, I think how people say it, that, you know, most African countries, certainly in Nigeria and Kenya, they have the policies for everything. But the implementation of it is always the key. And so having some level of policy certainty, but also coherence across different policy units is extremely important for us to even start to think about coming in. And one of the one example of how this has played out, particularly now in Ethiopia, is the only reason that we're here is because of a policy move from the government to actually open up the retail sector to foreign companies like us to be able to exhibit. So that's policy signal that we've seen. And this was announced last year, but since then, consistently, we've seen the government take actions to follow up this, to put in place the pillars of actually making this work. So the policy, that policy coherence and policy certainty and an ambitious sort of like policy signal that is convincing enough is critical. And we know also from just watching Ethiopia from afar that when the government does commit to something, they end up doing it. The other point that I'll also make that is critical in terms of actually the policy sensitive part is in our distribution side of things, operational efficiency is key. The only reason Sun King is successful is we're able to deliver our products to people who are extremely price sensitive, the low income earners, at the lowest possible price. Any sort of like inefficiencies within the supply chain of getting our products to them has a massive impact on price and has a massive impact on offtake. So we're extremely sensitive to operational issues within the country. For instance, importation efficiencies. And that's something that we're really looking forward to talking to about the government of Ethiopia, because we have learned that it's not an easy thing. It's a work in progress. Currently in Ethiopia, to be able to the ease of bringing in and exporting products regionally and also internationally. So this is something that we see as a potential limit to our scale if we're not able to work it out. But the good news is, in all our discussions that we've been having so far in the government, we've seen an unreal level of commitment to ironing these issues out with us. The government is pleased that we've sort of heeded their invitation to come in. They've only just relaxed these rules last year, and we're already in this year. Is also, the confidence needs to go both ways. Another point to make, especially because we are not just generally in retail, but we serve a social good that is also climate friendly. So one really important aspect from the public side is helping to improve affordability through subsidies. And Ethiopia currently actually has experience of this. They're currently subsidizing grid extension through financing from the World Bank and other partners. And they also have subsidy programs for the off-grid sector as well. It hasn't been moving as fast as they hoped, but hopefully with us coming in and with the experience we have across other countries, we can really make the marked change of this. But subsidies, sometimes in the development sector, historically has been seen as a bad word, as that, oh, it's an inefficient way of getting things done. But increasingly within the off-grid sector, it's actually a brilliant example of public-private partnership. Because the kind of subsidy we're talking about is not the government upfront, paying for a service that may or may not delivered. Is actually the government paying for results. So it's what's called RBFs, results-based finance type of subsidies. And that's also what the Ethiopian government is doing. So the government does not pay a penny until the service has been delivered. So we have to go out, design the product, bring it in, finance it, sell it, operate it, and only when the government is convinced that we've done all of this, do they pay down that subsidy. But what that subsidy helps is, if a system is going to cost, say, 15,000 beer, the government can say, this is a bit too much for this certain class of consumer, we would like to reduce that to, say, 10,000 beer. And so we should only then charge 10,000 beer instead of the 15,000 beer cost. So we will bear the initial 15,000 beer per unit customer, make sure that it's delivered, and only after the government is satisfied do they come in. So that's a way to drive in public sector investment upfront, which again we're committed to doing. Actually, we'll be making an announcement. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but hopefully you guys are around for the afternoon session of the MOUs. We have an exciting announcement to make with together with the EIC on how big we see our investment will be. So watch out for that. But for us to be able to have the confidence to do that is partly because we believe that this product can ultimately be affordable to people. And a lot of that is driven through the smart, PPP subsidies. And then I would say financing, broadly speaking, that cuts across is one important one. And it's usually really what we talk about and focus on a lot. But where we come in, and we come in at a certain level of financing, but we're only able to do that because we've been able to work with partners like SEFA, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, to raise financing upfront to actually build out the systems. And at some point in Ethiopia, that's possibly going to lead to discussions around local currency financing. Because the more you bring in financing from the outside, the slightly more expensive it is. But if you can actually raise financing from domestic sources, that actually improves, like you said, the supply chain, and so on. And the last point to just make is on the supply chain topic. We're pleased to see that Ethiopia is really trying to expand its ecosystem for manufacturing. And we hope that we can be able to tap into that and increasingly get more components that go into our systems from the local market. We're always looking to do this. In Kenya, we started up actually an assembly for some of our appliances, especially phones and TVs that go with our solar products. And we're hoping to do the same in Nigeria. If the conditions are right, there's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't want to partner with the government here in that way as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wale. I mean, I told you there would be some fireworks at this session, so thank you for releasing that news at our session, and I'm sure everyone will be there for the signing this afternoon as well. I wanted to ask Dr. Mukhtar to actually reflect a little bit on that from your perspective, because we've heard some ideas on what the government can do. We've also heard that there might be policies for everything, but the coherence and the implementation of those policies is extremely important. I also want to acknowledge the gentleman over there who's waving. So whilst you're giving an intervention, Dr. Mukhtar, I'll make my way down there so that he can then ask a question to the panel.
Okay, thank you. I think let me add on what I have said earlier. Particularly, I mean, this work that we have started with the World Bank is about developing program packages. Then, because we are looking, the government wants to move from small grants or small finance to big finance. For that, we should have to package in those areas Dr. Ranti has mentioned, like climate smart agriculture, the water sector, the energy sector. We have identified about 6 or 7 core program areas. Then we'll be developing the investment plan. The investment plan is about what can be developed and for which financial instruments. Definitely the intention is concessional loans and grants may be prioritized for adaptation programs. But the rest, particularly private sector, we are looking whether it's blended, de-risking, or local currency financing. All these are targeted for, will be targeted for mitigation activities. I mean, that we have mentioned. So just we might need like another 2-3 months to finalize that groundwork that we have started with the World Bank. Then we will definitely know what is investable and what is can be financed by these different instruments. By then we will also share. Probably we'll organize another platform for presenting the outcome of that exercise. On clean cooking, I think, as mentioned, I think even before that, before finalizing that investment plan, together with UNDP, last year, Ministry of Water and Energy have developed really a very good roadmap, which includes, I mean, which are indicating, you know, detailed needs by regions, set targets by regions. Also, the intention is now the clean cooking households accessing clean cooking, I mean, above tier 3 are around 10% at the moment, which is very low. So we are among the least served countries in Africa, I mean 20 countries in Africa. We want to move by 2035, we want to raise that 10% to 75%. And then I think I propose for my colleague really to speak to Ministry of Water and Energy and look into the opportunity there. There is a clear plan for that. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Robel Saido. I wear 2 hats, a consultancy hat and an investor hat. Last year I organized this forum, the first one. Now let me bring the second hat, which is an investor. So I want to talk about the private sector and scaling up investment in the private sector, which is very, very key. And I know that Sweden has led this green transition and of decarbonization. And also I know that Sweden has been part of investment in this country in the private sector because I'm a product of it, which my dad imported with people 200 Scania and Volvo buses back in the days. Also, I'm a product of a transport because my dad assembled the first bus in this country, assembled by Ethiopians, by the government, called Ethiopia HLBF. So now I have invested in transportation, huge investment, but transportation in Ethiopia, the heavy-duty transportation to Djibouti, has a lot of aspects, a lot of challenge. We learned from that challenge and developed a model that can benefit. Because transportation, 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. at the World Bank, and I attended a 1-week session where they talk how transportation impacts growth, impacts climate, especially Ethiopia adopting the EV policy. Transportation is a key factor in our country to reach market for efficiency. We have 2 hours queue of transportation for people using public transportation. I don't know if you have noticed that, even though we're managing to navigate through that. So my question being, especially for all of you who have intervened, is how can we better leverage on these green investment frameworks for people who have invested in this kind of transportation, which we have developed an innovative model that is working, creating jobs, creating youth employment, and to scale it up. So sometimes we don't know how this works, and we want to understand how we can work together to scale up, because as a private transportation company owner, it's a huge challenge to own it and to manage it. But when you transform those drivers and helpers into shared ownership, the game changes. So we have tried that model, it's working, and we want to scale it up. So I know most of my people here know me with my consultancy hat, so that I see some smiles, but thank you very much. I'm Saganalo.
So I'm going to say thank you so much for that, because of course shifting the needle requires behavioral change. to look at shared ownership requires behavioral change. And we've seen how this can actually create huge impact on the ground. You haven't actually pointed out anyone on the panel to answer that question, but of course it's open to everyone. Oh, you have. We'll just pass the mic.
Thank you. I guess I attracted this to myself, but actually, our dear brother here will have a better answer because first, it is the regulatory environment. The conversion, for example, existing vehicle fleet, options for importation of new cars, incentives to do all of those. And so what's the policy environment that allows that to happen? You are doing fantastic work already. And as you're an investor, you want to put your money into that. And we know for Ethiopia that is landlocked. Transportation is a big issue. A significant part of the cost is on the logistics, particularly on transportation. So how do we enable it for public transportation, but also for goods, a haulage of goods? So I'm hoping that there's already a policy environment that exists that responds to those. If there isn't, there are a sufficient number of us here who are champions, who are eager to work with the government of this, but the NDC 3.0 is very comprehensive. So at that high strategic level, it does. How do we operationalize NDC 3.0 to speak to the specific needs of specific sectors to address those? And I'm hoping that between ourselves and government, we will be able to engage in a deeper conversation about how we help to champion all of these issues. Banking, financing for those to bring in buses. What is the target? I know Ethiopia has targets. How many have we brought in? What are the constraints that are preventing us from bringing those numbers? Existing fleet, you have to convert them because they still continue to emit gases, greenhouse gases. So if you don't convert the existing fleet, what do you do? And what are the incentives when you convert? Where's the new financing that will enable you to work to bring in new buses to address all of those issues? It means that we have a fascinating conversation ahead of all of us in preparation for COP32. And from a UN perspective, we're actually looking forward to these kinds of joint collaborations so we can showcase all of the big things that Ethiopia is doing, but the new ideas that Ethiopia is putting on the table, we're very keen to work together to have them showcased at COP32.
So, Arte, I'm going to whisper out loud again, because we are indeed, running out of time for the session, and energy is renewable, but we've also got to go and eat to put some more energy in our bodies. But before we do that, of course, we need to hear from the full panel once again. And the only person we haven't heard from so far is Amanda. There's a lot for you, I think, to reflect on, both a challenge to us as international partners to come together in a more strategic way, but also really to continue the work that I know also, well, Sweden, but also UK has been doing prominently, which is to address the bottlenecks and facilitate more investment. So over to you to start with.
Thank you very much. And thank you for welcoming me on the panel in Rachel's place. So Azonia just mentioned COP32. So I just perhaps wanted to jump off that and share a few thoughts about how this is such a tremendous opportunity for Ethiopia on this agenda. And as Rachel mentioned earlier, a lot of the really difficult negotiations in the COPs have now been done, at least for the time being. So the focus now for the next 2 or 3 COPs needs to be on implementation, delivery, and showing progress. So it's almost like there's an open road at COP32 to just seize the opportunity to do the showcasing, the demonstration effects, and really just rally the international community and the international investment community around the opportunities, rather than having to be really deeply immersed in some very, very tricky and sometimes toxic negotiations. So they have a bit of a luxury, I think, in being able to see this as an opportunity to show the way and to present a very futuristic and optimistic agenda on investment. So just a few thoughts on how that could actually be done, practically speaking. So first of all, demonstrating that it's building the market foundations needed to translate that ambition into actual investable opportunities. And a powerful way to do that is by showcasing the amazing macroeconomic reforms that are underway, particularly those that applies to the green markets infrastructure reforms. From sustainable finance regulations to capital market modernization, all of this has that signaling effect that we've all been talking about, that Ethiopia is very serious about transparency, predictability, and long-term private sector engagement. So that's a demonstration. A second step could be to publish the National Climate Finance Strategy as a COP32 investment prospectus, giving those partners and investors who are planning to come to Addis in 2027 a clear and unified statement of priorities, the financing needs, and areas for collaboration, and giving that confidence that Ethiopia has a credible plan for delivering its NDC and absorbing capital at scale. Thirdly, as people have mentioned on the panel, demonstrating early green issuances, both corporate and sovereign, as proof of concept. Even small first mover transactions would show that Ethiopia's reforms are working and that climate-aligned investment vehicles can be brought to market and at scale. And then finally, success at COP, a successful COP32, will depend on turning ambition into execution, as I mentioned. So as everybody has said, developing bankable pipelines, designing fit-for-purpose financial instruments, building the institutional capacity needed to deploy capital effectively. Over the next 18 months, we have a really strong runway to be able to work collectively to support Ethiopia to do all of this. And therefore, it has the opportunity in November 2027 to present itself not only as the host of COP32, but a leader across the continent and indeed across the world in real economic transformation. So I think that is a very exciting opportunity that we have ahead of us. And I think we all have a role to play in supporting Ethiopia to rise to that challenge. Thank you.
So I know Hampus wants to let everyone out for lunch, but we were supposed to summarize this event, and I think we cannot do justice to summarizing this event. What I would like to do, though, is ask our panelists for a one-word answer. What you would like to see and what needs to be done in the runway that Amanda mentioned between now and COP32. One word on what you think is critical in terms of what we should be looking at. And Tomer, I'm going to start with you.
Transparency and clarity.
Transparency and clarity. Great. I mean, over to you.
So for me, is de-risking what is actually stopping investors from investing. Whatever that is, perceived or real risk from currency risk and all those things, if there is a mechanism we could work towards de-risking some of those things, certainly we will have more, we will see scaling up in financing.
Great. Dr. Valle.
Mine will be an aggressive implementation mindset, particularly from the government, from the development sector, and obviously we are ready to align with that.
Dr. Mukhtar.
Thank you. I think that's a homework for us. I mean, that suggestion is well taken. For COP32, of course, regarding finance, what we can say is, it is, we have started it. I mean, the investment plan that we are preparing is part of the product that we are planning for presenting for COP32, for the different opportunities that may exist. Again, Ethiopia is responsible also for leading on the SAIC. I mean, after climate summit, African Climate Summit 2, that declaration of head of states, and also the African Climate Initiative Compact, that was adopted, or the other interventions or initiatives that should have to be solved during the COP32. We are also working on that. That's all, yeah, I would like to share with the audience.
Thank you, Amanda. We will close the session
Just
with
three words instead of one. So, courage.
Then the program started on 6 p.m., so we will be having a cocktail and networking time. So I hope you are going to be there, because it's going to be a wonderful time. We wish you all the best.